um, re-spotlight everybody. Laura, you're first. And then Tobias. And there you are. Hi, Senator Manning. There we go.
Good evening, Mr. Reed and Senator Manning. Thank you so much for joining us. The way we're going to do this format tonight is I'm going to ask one of you a question and then the other will get a chance to answer it, and then we'll reverse order and go through that way. So we have several questions that to ask, so we'll go ahead and get started. We'll start with you, Mr. Reed. If you could introduce yourself to everyone and tell us why you think you're the best candidate to be Oregon's next Secretary of State.
Great. Well, thanks very much for convening us tonight. There are a lot of other things you could be doing tonight, and I appreciate your devotion to this important race. I'm running for Secretary of State because this is an office that really matters. And I know this group, the commitment that you all demonstrate for so long, knows that, but I think it's worth reiterating and thinking about why that's so important, especially right now. The unfortunate truth is that the things we count on in Oregon for how well we conduct elections and how easy and secure we make things are not automatic. And we see threats to those approaches all over the country. From mis and disinformation to violence, the bad policies being passed. And while we should be proud of what's happening in Oregon and the hard-won victories that we've achieved, we shouldn't make the mistake of thinking that they are automatic or invulnerable. I want to make sure that the Secretary of State's office is a defender of the ways that we make democracy work in Oregon. On top of that, the Secretary of State's office plays a really important role in making sure that tax dollars are spent efficiently and effectively, that programs and agencies and departments are operating appropriately. That's because the Secretary of State in Oregon is the auditor for the state. And on top of that, the Secretary of State registers all businesses in Oregon and plays an important role in helping to shape an economy that works for everyone. I want to take what I have learned as state treasurer and apply it in the Secretary of State's office, where I think stability and professionalism are in dire need. I learned a lot serving in the legislature for 10 years, had a very good experience helping to pass policies, to adopt budgets, to advance ideas. But I added to that experience over the last 7 years as your state treasurer, where we've managed a $140 billion portfolio. We've issued tens of billions of dollars of state debt. We've tracked hundreds of thousands of accounts for college, for retirement, $380 billion of transactions every year, and led an agency of hundreds of people that does the sort of work that is high stakes, that is nuanced, that can't be missed. The state really depends on the Treasury operating successfully to operate as a state. So I want to bring those lessons and that approach to the Secretary of State's office. That record, I think, is why my campaign has earned the support of the 3 former secretaries of state who've chosen to be involved in the race. Governor Roberts, Barbara Roberts, who was also Secretary of State, Phil Kiesling, who was Secretary of State, Gene Atkins, along with Governors Kulongoski, Kitzhaber, Congresswomen Bonamici, Salinas, Hoyle, the Oregonian, a whole slew of labor and institutional supporters. And with 3 weeks left to go, I'm very excited about the conversation we're about to have tonight. I hope to earn your support. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Treasurer Reed. So Senator Manning, the same question for you. Please introduce yourself to everyone and tell us why you think you're the best candidate to be our next Secretary of State.
Well, thank you for this evening. And again, I do agree. You all could have been doing other things at this time, more pleasant things, than to be here asking questions of 2 candidates for Secretary of State. So the question is, why am I running for the position of Secretary of State? I'm not a politician. I want to get that out there first. I will not give you political answers, hoopla, or political language like that. I'm a public servant. I know how to serve. I'm running to restore the trust and integrity to the office of Secretary of State. In doing so, I will also defend democracy while preserving vote by mail and ensuring our elections workers and volunteers are protected and that all of our data is secure. As I am a former United States Army soldier, served over 24 years active duty. One of the jobs that I've had or position was as a United States Army Assistant Inspector General. Only select people are given the opportunity to serve in that capacity. You have to go to attend what they call TIG-U, which is the United States Army Inspector General University. Since my time as an Assistant Inspector General, I've conducted audits nationally and internationally. I've done quite well at that and have received recognition by the Department of Army for my achievements. So we know that the Secretary of State, the Audit Division, is very critical. My expertise in that area makes me highly qualified as an expert in that area. As a member of the State Land Board, I am committed to not selling any parts of our national resources, our natural resources, our waterways, our public lands, our public forests. That's why I am the only candidate endorsed by the Sierra Club, 350 Salem, and Congressman Peter DeFazio. I recall as a EWEB commissioner, that's the Eugene Water and Electric Board Commission, EWEB came to us and asked us to sell public, to give them right away and sell portions of the McKenzie River to them. And I asked them at that time, I said, let me see if I understand this. You want us to approve selling you water rights to our natural resources so you can sell it back to us. I led the charge in the vote to kill that measure. And my other EWEB commissioners followed through on that.
Senator Manning, thank you. I'm kind of on a tight deadline. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted to thank you for your answer and move on to the next question, which is for you. So during the past legislative session that we just finished, a bill was introduced to ban mail-in voting in Oregon. And though it didn't go anywhere, we can see the growing pressure from Republicans to limit this or get rid of mail-in voting. So what are your thoughts about these efforts, and what will you, as Secretary of State, if you are elected, do to protect the model of democracy that our mail-in voting represents?
Thank you for that question. As I said previously, I will preserve and protect vote by mail. This race is not about 2 Democrats or 3 or 5. This race is about going against the presumptive Republican nominee, Dennis Linthicum. The bill that you referenced was one that Dennis had tried to introduce that never saw the light of day. I am interested in how I can expand access to the vote. That's why I introduced a couple of sessions ago, postage paid ballot return envelope. Oregon is now the highest, as far as voter participation, the highest in the nation, because of efforts that I have been a visionary to set forth. So this race is not about any Democrat, but it is a challenge because Republicans want to do away with vote by mail. They want to put Oregonians back in line to cast their ballot in line. We're not doing that. I am committed to defending that.
Thank you. Treasurer Reed, the same question for you. What are your thoughts about these efforts to curtail mail-in voting, and what would you do to protect it?
I think we have to take this really seriously, and I think what we've seen is not so much an effort to alter election results, but really an effort to undercut faith in democracy and the way that we help people to participate in our process. We need to take that seriously because I think it stems from a lack of confidence that people feel in the way that we conduct elections. One of the best things about the campaign for me so far has been the chance to visit with county clerks around the state. I think I'm at 24 or 25 of the 36 at this point. There were a few who were not interested in meeting at this point, but throughout those series of conversations, I heard lots of interesting stories about the different challenges that those clerks are confronting. the way they are trying to interact with their constituents to build confidence. And I think there are a number of things that we can do that allow people to see the controls, the procedures, the processes that are in place to make sure that ballots are secure, that they are handled appropriately, and that election results reflect the votes counted and give people that confidence. One idea in particular, I have been learning about a county in California taking the concept of ride-alongs and applying it to ballots. So when people have a chance to follow the path that a ballot follows and see all of those procedures, all the things that are in place, they can build up some confidence. It takes a while to do that, of course, but that experience can be really durable and equip people who might otherwise feel some lack of confidence to tell their neighbors and friends what they saw. I think it's with those proactive approaches that we can rebuild confidence. And of course, the Secretary of State has an enormous responsibility to be a vocal and visible advocate within the legislature and within county commissions to make sure that those county clerk's offices have the resources they need to carry out those programs and others that allow people to feel confidence and to choose to participate in elections and accept the results from those robust processes we're proud to have and will protect.
Thank you. Treasurer Reed, about those election workers, we heard stories of the threats and even threats of violence and harassment that they've experienced across the country. And it's made it difficult for election workers to continue in their jobs. What will you do to protect their safety and efficiency of election workers?
Well, you're right, and sadly, I'll extend your description a little bit because the threats and the violence that have been experienced are not limited to other places in Oregon, as Senator Manning will surely tell you, and we've talked about as well. They're even in Oregon and in Lane County, in Deschutes County, and other places in Oregon. So again, we need to take that seriously. We need to listen to the voices of those clerks from around the state. I've heard interesting things, creative solutions that the county clerks are taking on. Sometimes it results from partnerships with other parts of government, sometimes with external partners. But it's alarming when one clerk, as she told me, learned quickly that she doesn't go and retrieve ballots on election night. She goes and locks the ballot box at 8 o'clock and then returns the next morning when it's light, and she feels more equipped, safer to take that part of her job on. So I think the Secretary of State has, again, a really important role. And this is something I'm experienced in and proud of. Earning support from the legislature for budget investments to make sure that those county clerk's offices have the resources they need, that they are in a position to recruit people. We also heard from clerks about the challenges they're facing in terms of volunteers and paid staff to carry out that work. Those are all parts of the job that I think the Secretary of State needs to do, and I'm excited about embracing.
Thank you. Senator Manning, the same question to you about protecting election workers.
Well, I too have been out and I've spoken, I've visited with county clerks. By the way, they do more than just elections. They handle mineral rights. They handle things like marriage licenses. They do a lot more than just voting. Last year, someone mailed out some mysterious letters, Washington, Oregon, California, Georgia, and I believe it's Colorado. One of those letters came to the elections office here in Eugene, in my district. When they opened the letter, they found that it contained a white substance. The good news about it is that the substance was non-toxic. The bad news is that you look at the causational impact on the election workers and the clerks in the office. How did that send a message? Or what did they receive? I had been in conversation with the Senate president and the Senate co-chair of the Ways and Means, asking or putting on the table for $5 to $10 million to enhance security upgrades in all 36 elections offices to make sure that we are providing the best possible protective clothing and equipment that they need. And the other part is to make sure that we are conducting an education training standards, which doesn't exist. Sometimes we have elections workers that actually leave, which means that their post is not manned. So by setting a baseline standard of training, we can, in the event that it does occur, we can move an election worker from another office over to continue to make sure that we are participating in democracy by protecting vote by mail and ensuring that every vote counts and the data is clear and secure.
Thank you, Senator. Next question is also for you, and refers to the misinformation or disinformation that both of you have alluded to surrounding elections. How will you protect election integrity and ensure that Oregonians understand and believe that our elections are free and fair? What can you do about the disinformation that surrounds elections?
Well, to begin with, great question. To begin with, as far as voter fraud, Oregon has the lowest number of voter fraud accusations. None proven, but lower. So education is always important. How you get education out? You have to begin with a standard of education at the levels of the elections office. Again, I go back to the $5 to $10 million that I have already started conversation. Conduct training, and how do we get that out there? The other part is to make sure that Oregonians know when they cast their ballot, it is safe, it is counted, and the data is secure. Now, we have a robust method of serious signature verifications. In addition to that, we have a paper trail. That means that all of the data is aligned. More importantly, I plan to go out and visit not just our elections offices, but all our counties to make sure that we are delivering the message. I don't lead by sitting in an office. I'm the kind of person that has a personal touch because at the end of the day, this is about people. This is how people understand a relationship. I'm very good at that. I've demonstrated that in my time in the Senate by passing over 124 measures that are now law.
Thank you, Senator. Treasurer Reed, the same question for you. The problem of disinformation and how would your office deal with it? I mean, in the last election, we had someone who lost the election and he's still saying that he won. And I think a lot of people believed that for a long time. So what do we do about that?
Well, sadly, I don't think it's limited to one person. I think I know who you're talking about, but there's more than just one candidate who's claiming that. And of course, our desire, our goal should be that someone on the side of an election that doesn't prevail has the reaction of saying, I need to convince more people, not that there's something wrong with the process. So a lot of this, I think, comes back to perception and the way people feel about what's happening behind what can too often and to too many people feel mysterious and even invisible. There are several counties in Oregon that engage with something. This is a brand name, so there are other places to do it. It's called ballot tracks. And if you are in a community, a county that has that opportunity, I encourage you to opt in. What it does is allow yourself to receive messages from the county elections office. They come at 3 different times. The first says your ballot is on the way, and it can arrive via email or via text. You receive a second one when your ballot has been received on the way back, either by mail or in a drop box, and a third one, which often follows very quickly, that says your ballot has been accepted and will be counted once the signature has been verified. Each of those steps, I think, improves people's confidence in knowing where their ballot is, when to be on the lookout for it, those sorts of things. The only reason I've been able to discover that all counties don't use that is the simple matter of cost. And it's not a lot, but this is an example, I think, of where we can make a really good investment on the part of the state. And if I'm lucky enough to be Secretary of State, I will also be a former state treasurer. So I'll be able to say this is a good investment with additional credibility, because when people have confidence, they'll be more apt to participate. They'll have more of a stake in the outcomes. And I think they'll be less likely to be susceptible to the kind of mis and disinformation that we see. There's also great scholarship around the concept known as pre-bunking, which is essentially to say, you might hear this piece of misinformation. Here's why it's not true. And by equipping people to more skeptically and smartly consume that kind of misinformation, we'll be equipping people to resist the kind of conspiracies that too often fill a vacuum when we are not out in front and on offense. So those are a couple of things that really matter to me in terms of how we can help people be better equipped to deal with an ever more complicated and clouded information environment.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you both a quick follow-up question that was in the chat. If you could keep your answers to under 30 seconds, that would be great. Can law enforcement be involved in protecting the transport of ballots, especially like from remote areas?
They can.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Treasurer.
They can, and in fact, they are. I've talked to, as I said, 24 plus county clerks, and law enforcement is involved in some cases. It depends on the relationship that a given county clerk has with their sheriff's office and what resources are there. Of course, we know in some counties across the state, the sheriff's offices are not well staffed or well resourced either. But those relationships work in some cases. In some other cases, it's not law enforcement. I remember one county clerk talked about the partnership that she has with the American Legion as other folks who can accompany folks picking up those ballots. But and then there are also drop boxes in some other counties that are simply put in secure locations like city halls in cities that aren't exactly near the original elections office. So there are ways to do that. Law enforcement can certainly be among them.
Senator Manning, what about that? Do you think law enforcement can be involved in protecting the transport of ballots, especially in rural areas?
I think law enforcement can, but then I also want to remind or bring back up is that the ballot paid return envelopes be a good way of getting the ballots done. And some people have questioned about that process, USPS. The thing is that once that ballot is mailed in, they go through a process called a cancellation device. The cancellation device put the date time stamp on that envelope. So if a ballot is received via USPS 3 days, a week later, by that cancellation device date, it shows that that vote can count because it was mailed out at the appropriate time. Secure ways of doing drop boxes, I'm open to any kind of way to ensure that every vote is protected, the data is protected, and every ballot, every vote is counted. And we have to make sure that people understand this. So yes, law enforcement can play a role in that, but we have a pretty good system in place.
Thank you. It's a good reminder to use mail-in balloting right up to May 21st. In November, there will be a measure on the ballot for ranked choice voting. It was referred by the voters in the legislature, referred to the voters by the legislature in 2023. Star voting will be on the ballot in Eugene this May, and proponents are hoping to get that on the ballot as a statewide initiative too. So if not this year, then 2026. What do you see as the pros and cons of these alternative voting methods? And do you support either? I'll start with Senator Manning.
Thank you for that question. I serve currently on the Senate Rules Committee. When that measure came to Senate Rules Committee, I expressed my concerns. I think that if you don't have name recognition or if you are people of color, it could be very damaging. It could be very challenging because of the way it is designed. My first question would be, what problem are we trying to solve? Currently, Oregon has the highest voter participation rate in the nation. So I did vote for that out of Senate Rules Committee. I wanted to make sure I was on the record with that. And when it got to the Senate floor, I voted for it there too, because the measure is being forwarded to the people of Oregon to make a decision whether or not they want to adopt that. Whatever decision the people of Oregon makes is one as Secretary of State that I will faithfully discharge.
Thank you. Treasurer Reed, what do you think about ranked choice voting or star voting, and what are the pros and cons you see?
I appreciate the way you asked that question as pros and cons, because I think there are some significant pros and cons. On the pro side, I have a fairly simple answer here. I think anything that allows people to feel like their preferences and the details and nuances of the way they feel about things on the ballot are better reflected in their vote, that's a good thing. It means more people are more likely to vote, and we'll have a healthier democracy. But I'm also concerned about the challenges of implementing reforms like this. It's complicated. Most of us don't think about all the details that are involved in carrying out an election, particularly one that would involve a new system, one that would cross county boundaries in a number of cases. All of these things need to be done in ways that promote and build confidence in our systems. And I think one of the worst possible outcomes would be the passage of either or both, followed by a poor implementation that would have the result of people feeling less confident and less apt to participate. So whether it's ranked choice or star, we got to follow through. We got to match our good intentions with our execution. Of course, ranked choice voting being statewide on the ballot is going to be the one that we confront first. And if it passes, I think there's a good chance of that passing. It's going to be incumbent upon the Secretary of State to have a solid plan for execution that makes sure that the county elections offices have the resources they need, that procedures are in place to ensure that people have confidence in how this is implemented. I'm sure we're going to talk about campaign finance reform as well, but both of these are examples of where execution has to match our good intentions, and that's something you can count on me for.
Thank you. And speaking of campaign finance reform, that is my next question. The state legislature passed HB 4024 this past session, campaign finance reform. Tell us, Treasurer Reed, what you think about the reforms that were included in that law, and how will you work to make sure they're allowed so that wealthy donors and dark money don't have an outsized influence in Oregon politics?
Well, let me first compliment Senator Manning and his colleagues in the legislature for doing something I think was long overdue, which is passing this legislation and getting us on the road to reducing the impact of money in politics. I don't think that this is a panacea. I think that it is going to require good execution and likely refinements going forward. But we shouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and I'm glad that we're getting started on this. But as I mentioned, I think this is really essential to have a good implementation that follows the good intentions and the passage of legislation. And as a comparison, I look closely at the work we did in Treasury to create a program I'm immensely proud of. I hope you are too. It's called Oregon Saves, and it's the nation's first opt-out retirement plan for people in the private sector who don't have that opportunity. No one had ever done anything like this. So I had to laugh every time someone would say in the early days, is it following the projections? And I laugh because there weren't any projections. No one had ever done this before. And the reason I can now say we have 130,000 people who have saved $260 million is because we were so committed to the discipline and the diligence of making individual refinements and improvements and getting all of the details right and going back again and again to our partners as employers, to individual savers. You can easily map that process to what will be required for campaign finance reform. The diligence of working with county clerks, with candidates and campaigns and lobby groups and unions and all the people who participate in our process, including individual voters who want to use our database to understand where campaigns are raising money, how that reporting works. All of those details have to be handled. And I think it is essential to have someone in the Secretary of State's office who has that demonstrated record of success in turning complicated concepts into real results that people can feel. That's the experience I'm going to draw on. That's the approach I'm going to take as Secretary of State.
Thank you, Treasurer. Senator Manning, tell us what you think about the reforms in that campaign finance law, and how would you as Secretary of State work to make sure they're followed?
Okay, I was getting confused. I thought the question was regarding campaign finance reform. So yes, that's right. I am honored and proud that I voted to move that forward. The implementation of the bill, the measure itself, is going to require the legislature, which is the E-Board, will be meeting in order to fund it. So that's where it is before we can get started. The biggest problem, Citizens United got it wrong. The Supreme Court got it wrong. When they did what they did, put us in there. Dark money will still be able to infiltrate Oregon campaigns. You know, we have not fixed the whole problem. It's going to require a federal solution, which they are not willing to do at this time. I think that something that I had been working on for a lot of years, talking with my good friends in the Senate, how do we move this measure forward? Campaign finance reform is great. My campaign, this campaign I'm on, I've only received small dollar donors. No corporate funds have come towards me. And I'm fine with that because if you're going to be the leader of a process, you have to demonstrate that. So I am leading the way to show that we can run a campaign off of dollars that are raised from small dollar donors here in the state without outside influence flowing into the fray to influence the election. So yes, I am proud to have cast my vote. I look forward to implementation of campaign finance reform. I will continue working with our federal partners to pressure them to see if they can put pressure to enact legislation that will reverse the damage that Citizens United has done.
Thank you. Senator Manning, we had a question in the chat about your ties, or if you have any ties or investments or campaign contributions from fossil fuel or timber or other business interests. And I assume that's related to what would be your work on the land board as Secretary of State.
First, thank you for that. First and foremost, I have my values, and I see this all the time. I was in the military. I will not use my position to gain pleasure nor profit. I will not compromise my integrity nor my moral values. I don't receive any money from corporations, nothing from fossil fuel industry, nothing from the tobacco industry, nothing from the petroleum industry. All of my money, funds that I raise, are from small dollar donors, everyday Oregonians. So as a member of the State Land Board, again, I am committed and I'm on the record. I will not sell our private parks, waterways, nor our public forests.
Thank you. Treasurer Reed, the same question to you about any family or private investments in fossil fuels or timber or other business interests that, or campaign contributions that might impact your work on the land board if you were elected.
I'm not sure I understand the question entirely. I have contributions from lots of different people, and I think that reflects the strength of our campaign and the confidence that people have in me. But my decisions are not affected by the donations and the contributions that I'm proud to receive. I make decisions based on what I think are the best interests of Oregon and its future, and it's as simple as that.
Thank you. So we have time for closing statements. If there's anything else that you'd like us to know as we get ready to vote in the next couple of weeks, Senator Manning, if you'd like to start.
Well, thank you. I really do appreciate this time. Again, I'd like to reiterate, you could have been doing anything pleasant than sitting down, listening to us respond to questions, certainly very important questions. Again, I have to say, I am not a politician. I'm not going to give you a lengthy, drawn out answer to something. I am proud that because of my effort for 7 years, that in about 2 to 5 years, Oregon will be the first state in the nation to have a universal healthcare single payer system. I worked on that for 7 years and I got it done. And I'm proud of that. This is about people. This is about the future of Oregon, how we want to move forward. Protecting vote by mail, making sure that our public lands, waters, and public forests are not for sale. When we talk about campaign finance reform, to be upfront, a leader, demonstrate. I believe that by leading from the front, showing people what your values are is critically important. I'm running to restore the trust and integrity to the Office of Secretary of State. I'm running to make sure that we preserve and defend democracy and vote by mail. I want to make sure our elections workers and those volunteers are protected and have the necessary security and protections that they need and training. I am running because Oregon needs a true progressive champion, and I am the only one that is endorsed by the Progressive Democrats of Oregon. VoteJamesManning.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Treasurer Reed.
Thanks for the time. Let me first, before I sum up, I see a comment from Trish in the chat, and Trish, if you're willing to send me an email, Tobias@tobiasreed.com, happy to follow up and have an extended conversation at your convenience. As to the rest of the conversation, I've enjoyed it. I think you all asked good questions, and I appreciate the chance to share some of my thoughts. I'm in this business because I really believe that we can make the lives of Oregonians better with state government. That's what has motivated me to run for the legislature, to run for treasurer, and now to run for Secretary of State. While I have been state treasurer for the last 7 years, we've had 4 secretaries of state. And I think that turnover and that instability has really hampered the capacity of the office to do the work that Oregonians depend on. From elections that we talked about at great length, to audits to make sure that people have confidence not only in our votes but in the way we operate government. These are among the highest responsibilities that the Secretary of State has. And I think one of the best indicators of future results is past performance when it comes to elected office. So I encourage people to look at what we have done in the state treasury. We have transformed the state treasury in a lot of ways and added to its capacity. We've improved our ability to respond to the needs of Oregonians. We've improved the representation in our workforce. And I want to take that experience into the Secretary of State's office that I think is in need of that stability and professionalism. I would not have the endorsements of all the people who have previously done this job. I wouldn't have the endorsements from members of Congress, from labor organizations, from progressive elected and community leaders across the state if people didn't understand the record that I've built as treasurer and the approach that I will take as Secretary of State. So your ballots are going to be in your hands very shortly. And I know I can depend on this group to vote up and down the ballot. And I hope you will vote for me as well. Thank you for the time tonight. You can certainly follow up with anyone who's interested. Emails Tobias@tobiasreed.com. Thanks a lot.
Thank you both for a great conversation tonight. I'll turn it back over to you.